The Sky region in Tears of the Kingdom was one of the many things Nintendo added to differentiate it from Breath of the Wild. It adds an entirely new layer of gameplay and atmosphere to the world that many of us have grown to love. Whether you like the Sky Islands, or felt that they were underutilized, we can all most likely agree that there's one main island that stands out above most of the others. Of course, I'm talking about the Great Sky Island. The Great Sky Island is similar to Breath of the Wild's Great Plateau, as it is the tutorial level before the rest of the game. Before I continue, I want to make clear that this video will not be tying everything the Great Sky Island does to the Great Plateau. Of course, I will be showing some of the main similarities between the two, but I feel that the Great Sky Island is different enough to not just be known as a second Great Plateau. One more thing before we proceed, this video will contain minor spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom's story and gameplay, so if you plan on playing this game soon and haven't already, feel free to come back at a later date. For the first thing I want to talk about, I'm going to be ignoring the fact that I was going to try and refrain from comparing the Great Sky Island to the Great Plateau, because who needs consistency? Getting back on track, one of the bigger premises of Breath of the Wild was survival. I wouldn't classify it as a survival game per se, but at least early on, one of the things I usually focused on was trying to survive in the extremely expansive open world that it has. Most of the world consisted of land that was not inhabited by many civilizations, so you would often find yourself alone, especially on the Great Plateau, where the only other sign of intelligent life that wasn't a monster trying to kill you consisted of an old dude who turned out to be a ghost. In Tears of the Kingdom, survival was also one of the bigger premises, but to a lesser degree, and the Great Sky Island shows this, with the many helper constructs that are placed around the map that are supposed to teach us different game mechanics, but I'll get back to them. On the Great Sky Island, there is a severe lack of monsters roaming around like there was on the Great Plateau. Instead, they are mostly replaced by soldier constructs, who are the guardians of the Isles. At this stage, these guys aren't that hard to beat, and don't serve that much of a challenge, unless you're fighting a large group of them at once, which you don't do that often. Aside from the soldier constructs, it seems that some of Ganondorf's influence has reached the Great Sky Island, with there being a small selection of his monsters that you can find, such as Choo-Choos, Keys, and Like-Likes. The first two we've already seen before, but the Like-Likes are a brand new addition to Tears of the Kingdom. At least we didn't see them in Breath of the Wild. They take a little bit more strategy to take down, and are usually found in caves. That is pretty much the extent of the enemies we see on the Great Sky Island, besides one much stronger monster that I'll go over later. Monsters aren't the only thing we need to focus on though, as the terrain can also prove to be hard to overcome. Obviously, we currently inhabit a giant island in the sky, so one wrong step and you'll go flying off. This won't be enough to kill you, but it's still not ideal nonetheless. Considering the fact that the Great Sky Island isn't just one island, but instead is an archipelago of islands, falling off can be a bigger issue than you would first think. Most likely in the later part of your adventure on the Great Sky Island, you'll stumble into the cold region of the Isles. Just like in Breath of the Wild, you can counteract this problem by either just eating warm food, or by carrying a torch with you until you eventually find better gear. Like the old man from Breath of the Wild, you can meet a construct that'll teach you how to counteract the cold. Many of the other helper constructs you meet also teach you different things you should know on your journey, hence their names, but I'll get back to that later. As you may know, on the Great Sky Island, we acquire 4 new abilities, similar to the ones we got in Breath of the Wild. We get 3 of them from different shrines that we are told to locate and enter by the ghost of Rauru. Rauru is similar to the old man from Breath of the Wild, as in they both accompany us during our times in the tutorial area. And as of making this video, spoiler alert, I realize that they are both spirits of previous kings of Hyrule. I can't believe I didn't notice this before. Anyways, Rauru tells us that we need to go to 3 shrines of light to try and regain the lost power for our new arm. In each of these shrines, Rauru grants us new unique abilities that will prove to be crucial for our journey ahead. These abilities include Ultra Hand, Fuse, and Ascend. The one that the game hints at us getting first is the Ultra Hand ability. The Ultra Hand ability is like Magnesis on steroids. Not only does it move more objects than just metallic ones, it is also used to fuse different things together, leading to you being able to create vehicles later on. It's used in many puzzles throughout the rest of the game, and is crucial in proceeding throughout the rest of the Great Sky Island. Towards the end of the shrine where you get the Ultra Hand ability, you are given a Light of Blessing, Tears of the Kingdom's version of the Spirit Orbs. After you leave the shrine, Rauru appears once again to send you on your merry way towards the next shrine. If you're like me, you'll end up getting the Fuse ability next. The Fuse ability is somewhat similar to the Ultra Hand ability, except instead of fusing 2 items on the ground together, the Fuse ability allows you to fuse 1 item to your weapon, shield, or an arrow you're about to shoot. You can use this ability to make some really cool, powerful weapons to use against enemies. Or you can make some horrific abominations that shouldn't have seen the light of day. There are countless possibilities of weapon combinations that you can make, and the only limit is your imagination. Even to this day, I'm still coming up with new ideas I've never even thought of before. Once you finally reach the third shrine on the top of the mountain in the snowy region of the Great Sky Island, you get the Ascend ability. Ascend isn't the, best of the bunch, I'll say. It's arguably the worst, but at least it's not as bad as Cryonis. Ascend is used to, well, ascend through structures above you, and you can actually use it in a plethora of places, which does make it pretty useful in scaling mountains or leaving caves. That's all I really have to say about Ascend. After you get these 3 abilities, you finally have enough power in your arm to open the front door to the Temple of Time, which I should have mentioned was the point of getting these abilities earlier, but once we are at the door of the new Temple of Time, we can finally open it, and once we enter, we see this really weird glowing rock, which, after touching, sends us to a spectral-looking Zelda who gives us our 4th ability, Recall. I'm skimming over this part because there's a lot more to it than just that, but that's not exactly the point of this video. As I said, Zelda gives us our 4th ability, Recall, which is sort of like Stasis from Breath of the Wild, but instead of freezing time for an object, we send it back in time. Well, we reverse the object's movement, I guess, meaning it'll undo any movement it's made in the close past, I guess. Time travel is some tricky business, man. One wrong move and you screw physics up. After getting Recall, Rauru explains that even he has no clue what that was about. Okay, cool, thanks man. You continue through the temple using Recall until you reach a door you can't open. Rauru explains that you are still in a weakened state, and aren't strong enough to open the door. Okay, cool, thanks man. But this time, he instructs us to use the Pura Pad to return to the island we awoke on. There, after using Recall and Ascend some, we find the 4th shrine, which tests our use of Recall. After completing the 4th shrine, we can finally replenish some of our lost strength from... After that, we can finally open the door, but before I continue, we aren't quite finished here yet. I still have plenty more to talk about, so we'll get back to this part of the story later. I've already mentioned this a few times, but the Great Sky Island isn't just one island, but a series of isles all in close proximity to one another, making it easy enough to traverse. Most of the island, I'm still going to be calling it an island for simplicity's sake, has pretty decent weather, with a small portion of it being cold enough to contain a decent portion of snow, which doesn't make much sense considering the portion you wake up in is way higher than the snowy part, so you would think it would have snow as well, but it doesn't. Though I'm not here to critique the realism of it, it's a massive floating island after all. There's plenty of water to be found despite it being an island. It even has a giant lake in the western part that you may cross at some point. Lots of this water can be seen falling from the island via waterfalls, which would make me ask the question, how has the island not ran out? But then again, we can get Zonai water hydrants, which somehow produces infinite amounts of water as long as you have power using futuristic-esque technology. Throughout the entirety of the Great Sky Island, you can find the ruins of small structures all over, which are now just remnants of the Zonai people. Some of these structures overhang off the side of the island, which, after all this time, doesn't seem like the safest thing in my opinion. If I were to make a guess, I would assume these weren't used as houses by the Zonai, but were more for decoration, and as a simple way to gaze at faraway areas. We can also find many paths and other structures more towards the center of the islands, which may have been homes to the Zonai. Maybe that, or were just storehouses for supplies. Or maybe they were being used to shelter the many constructs that inhabited and still do inhabit the island. If you guys have any ideas what these structures were used for, then let me know down in the comments below. Oh right, structures. Next, let's talk about the place Link wakes up in. After the intro of the game, Link finds himself waking up once again in a strange, mysterious room, this time luckily with all of his memories. As we continue forwards, we can see that this place has really gone to ruin, with tree roots growing throughout the entire structure. We eventually get to a point where Link uses his new arm to activate this weird Zonai device, which seems to awaken the place he's in, starting some gears and opening the door forwards. Not only that, but we can also hear the bells of the Temple of Time start to ring, so maybe this reawakened the entire island? I'm not 100% sure and don't want to make any outrageous claims, so I'll just leave it at that. We continue even further until eventually, we make it outside the structure we were in, and for the first time, see the rest of the Great Sky Island. The only other part of the island I really want to talk about is the Temple of Time. This Temple of Time is the main structure on the Great Sky Island, and, I won't go into spoiler territory for it, can be seen in later parts of the game and serves a somewhat important purpose. For us at this moment though, it just serves as the main obstacle in our path, as we try to find a way to either get in or past it. It easily overshadows any other Zonai structure on the Great Sky Island. As you journey across the Great Sky Island, every day at 7 AM and 7 PM, you can hear the Temple of Time's bells chime twice. This is to signify to all of the constructs and probably the Zonai as well back in the day, when it was time to start and stop working. No matter where you are on the island, you can always hear these bells chime. During my first playthrough, it would always sort of remind me of the clock tower's bells and Majora's Mask that would always chime. Before we finish things off, the final thing I want to talk about is the Zonai constructs that we can find throughout the entirety of the Great Sky Island. During our adventure, we can speak to Rauru, who will give us more information about the purpose of their creation. I've mentioned this before, but there are two main types of constructs: helper constructs and soldier constructs. Let's start off with the helper constructs. The helper constructs aid Link on his quest by either giving him special items he'll need, or by telling him important information about different survival tactics or Zonai devices. The first helper construct we come across gives Link the Purah Pad, an invaluable tool that's used later on, and instructs us that Princess Zelda is waiting for us in the Temple of Time, which she sort of was, I guess. Not really, but whatever. As we continue towards the Temple of Time for the first time, we can find even more helper constructs who will give us useful information for our quest ahead, like how to cook food, or later on how to survive in colder climates. One helper construct even warns us about the many soldier constructs we can stumble across on the Great Sky Island. Speaking of which, the soldier constructs are the main enemies you'll be fighting on the Great Sky Island. These things are found in a plethora of areas you visit, and can prove to be quite a challenge if you're new to the game. They'll use a variety of weapons against you, ranging from sticks to makeshift axes, and are mainly a threat when there's a large group of them. Usually, there will only be about 3 of them, so they shouldn't pose too much of a threat, but every once in a while, you'll stumble across a construct captain. Construct captains are stronger than the soldiers, obviously, and have the special ability of being able to fuse objects to their weapons, just like Link. Here, the worst thing they can do is combine a flame emitter to their weapon, or they can do something arguably as bad in my opinion, turning their weapon into a giant fan. Despite how annoying these things can be, the soldier constructs aren't necessarily evil per se. They were designed to protect the Zonai from outside intruders, mainly monsters. The problem is, they can't tell Link apart from a monster, so they'll attack him as well. For all they know, Link is also an intruder, and they're just trying to do their job. The final construct I want to talk about is the boss that you can fight here, the Flux Construct Mark I. The Flux Construct is noticeably bigger than the other constructs, and is made up of about 25 different blocks, and will attack you on sight. I'm not 100% sure what the point of it is lore-wise. I guess it's just another safety measure made by the Zonai, but I'm not sure what exactly it's protecting here on this random little island. I'll point out the fact that it can fly, but it never seems to leave this island, so I don't know. I guess it's time to get back to the story. After opening the door in the Temple of Time, we are once again greeted by the outside. Before we continue on though, Rauru speaks to us once again. He explains to us how the Shrines of Light have mitigated some of the gloom's effects, which, I mean, yeah, that was the point. He also expresses that though our time with him has been brief, he's happy that we were able to finally meet, and that Link is exactly as Zelda said. Rauru says he's done everything he could for her, and now that it is up to us to help her however possible before disappearing. We continue on this really precarious path until we finally reach the end of it. At the end, we see this weird ball of light that seems to react with the shattered Master Sword. I kinda forgot we had that, to be honest. Link decides to put the Master Sword into the ball of light and, whoa, cool time travel stuff happens. Afterwards, that dragon that I haven't mentioned yet that's been flying around the island this entire time breaks the clouds, opening up a way for us to get down. Before we jump, we can hear Zelda say,
"Link, you must find me."
Okay, now you can jump. I will say, I don't hear people talk about this jump enough. After all this time, you are finally returning to Hyrule. It's not like when we first left the Great Plateau for the first time. Then, we didn't know this world at all. It was completely brand new to us. But now, we've seen it before, and instead of exploring completely new territory, we are open to see how the world has changed. And that's just as powerful in my opinion. After landing from a height that would surely kill Link if this was realistic, you can finally begin your journey.